Lawyers of Reddit, what is this the worst way y'all seen a person screw over someone else in court, whether it be criminal, civil, or divorce proceedings? Not the worst, but one that sticks out that they did to themselves. Woman shows up to court in a Ritz party time matches. Drink up. T-shirt. She was there for her first appearance on a third DUI charge. Judge was not in a humorous mood that day. Not a lawyer, but when my Phil and Mil got divorced, she wanted to file jointly for the previous year because they were still married. They would have gotten a decent refund. He insisted on filing separately, despite the fact that he would owe $4,000, because he wanted her to also owe the IRS. He did it to frost her ass. Sitting waiting for my client and the judge is giving a mass colloquy for an alternative program on a DUI. Basically probation. Question: has anyone consumed alcohol or taken drugs in the last 24 hours? Obvious answer aside, one dude proudly raises his hand. I smoked some dope last night. He did not get probation. Not my case, but still my favorite story. Dude screwed himself over when he went to jury trial for a burglary charge and wore the same distinct sweatshirt he wore the night he committed the crime. Kind of hard to argue the guy in the video isn't your client at that point. Needless to say, he was convicted and spent a few years in dock. A wife filed for a restraining order because she wanted the house during divorce. Husband has good job, like $200,000 per year. Employer finds out about restraining order. Husband is fired. He was very specialized employee, so only job he can find close to house. Ex-wife and daughter is $50,000. House gets foreclosed. Child support at less than $500 per month. Wife has to get job as waitress. 4 cars get repossessed. There's a lawyer in my town who has a reputation for being a real D. He left a very successful firm to go off on his own. He and the firm negotiated which clients he would take and how eventual fees from those clients would be divided. All seemed fine and dandy. As soon as he is out the door, he sues his old firm saying the deal is unenforceable and that he should 100% of the fees from the clients who came with him. He lost and appealed, lost again and appealed to the state Supreme Court, where they shut his ass down and, in extremely diplomatic language, pretty much called him a D. One time, I saw an indigent defendant who was in custody tell the judge his public defender wasn't working hard enough and he wanted the judge to appoint different counsel. The judge asked him what specifically was the problem and he said, "I don't want a female lawyer. I need a man who can take charge and fight for me," or something very similar to that. The judge, also female, said that's not how it works. Then he started yelling and getting into specifics about his public defender. Just mainly, "I don't like her. She won't visit me, etc." The judge is annoyed and looks at him and is like, "Fine, I'll appoint another attorney for you. But because you are not satisfied with your attorney and I need time to appoint you new counsel, I am not going to hear any other issues today and will reset your case." A few days later, the judge sends defendant notice of his new appointed attorney, who happens to also be female, and notice of the case reset for 6 weeks. The case was originally set for a bond hearing and the DA and his PD had agreed to release him on an unsecured bond, meaning he would have gotten out that day if he hadn't thrown his temper tantrum. Instead, he waited another 6 weeks in jail just to have another female attorney represent. Kind of a self-screw, but the MPAA entered DVD John's code for breaking DVD copy protection as part of their lawsuit into their evidence, which then became public record. The code that breaks DVD copy protection was now available to the entire world, defeating the entire purpose of their lawsuit. Ianal. But there was a case going on in my town between a father and son that was hilarious. The dad is a big time personal injury attorney around here who started his own firm under his name, George Sink, and his son ended up joining the family business. Well, they had a falling out, so the son goes off to start his own firm. He has his dad's name, so the dad is suing the son for using the name he gave him to start his own law firm. Was involved in a custody case where a wife cheated on her husband and had a child as a result. She let husband believe the child was his until she was about 5 years old and they were divorcing. To stop him from getting custody, she convinced the biological father to try to get custody, thinking that if he won she would wind up with the child. Became a huge 3-way fight. Multiple sets of grandparents involved. Attorney's fees skyrocketed because the case would have been pretty quick otherwise. She couldn't pay her attorney. Tried to get the bio dad too. Got even messier. etc. Basically there still isn't an agreement all parties will follow. They are in and out of court every year or so. She screwed herself. Had a criminal jury trial for misdemeanor criminal mischief over 4 years ago. State filed charges and kept amending the information to the point where they left the actual victim out of the trial and proceeded with the 2 eyewitnesses. Well, one of the witnesses was my client's ex and the other witness was the ex's new GF. They claimed my client vandalized the actual victim's car. Client denied everything. Well, apparently, the state and both witnesses had no idea that the ex had an outstanding warrant for not paying child support to my client, which created a motive for him to lie. Asked him if he was aware that he had a warrant out for his arrest on the stand. He didn't know. The judge excused the jurors. The bailiffs arrested the ex on the stand. State rested. Judge granted our motion for judgment of acquittal because we had good case law for the victim not being there. Client walked away free and the ex went to jail. I am being sparse on details here due to confidentiality, but I had a client who was accused of a very nasty sexual offense. He had an alibi. He was at work, where he was the boss. He had an employee who could absolutely vouch for his being there. I talked to the employee. Employee confirmed this. It gets closer to the trial, and around the time when I need to send in an alibi notice, which is advance notice to the Crown so that they can investigate the alibi and determine whether or not it's true. But I am being careful, so I call the employee up again. Turns out my client fired him in the interim. And so the employee quite candidly tells me, oh, yeah, he was definitely at work, but that's not what I'll say in court. Duck that guy. He is going down. I did not call him as a witness, or file the alibi notice. Still won the trial. But if I hadn't thought to call the guy, or if he'd been less candid, my client would have been ducked hard. 6 offender registry, jail time, the works. Completely innocent. Not a lawyer, but my dad is a physician and is sometimes called as a professional witness in cases of malpractice. In one memorable case, a family was suing a doctor for something fairly frivolous, and my dad was a witness for the defense. The lawyer representing the family was cross-examining my dad, and brought up a chapter in a medical textbook and asked my dad to read a highlighted paragraph. He does, and the lawyer says something to the effect of, so, what you just read means less than blah blah medical thing more than. My dad confidently replied, no, it does not mean that. Lawyer, no, but if you read this, the author clearly states less than blah blah medical thing more than. Dad, no, really. That's not what the author means. Lawyer, how do you know that's not what the author meant? Dad, well, because I wrote it. Judge basically facepalmed while the lawyer mimicked a goldfish and stared at the author name on the chapter. Basically the best moment of my dad's professional life. Yes, ruling was in the defendant's favor. This wasn't my case but followed it closely because it was an acquaintance's divorce proceedings. He and his now ex-wife shared some commercial property that was worth some dough. They were both on the paperwork, had access to the same info. Well, some it hit the fan and the property was in arrears and I think some lien was filed. The husband would try to talk to his then wife about the whole thing and she would blow him off. Not only would she ignore him and the finances, she started cheating on him. Fast forward to divorce. It's contentious and they get down to fighting for the primary residence whose market value, unencumbered, is much less than the commercial building. She demanded the house and the husband effectively offered to give her the commercial building if he could keep the residence. She never paid attention to how bad off the commercial building was and for some strange reason her lawyer didn't do any due diligence so they took the deal. I don't know if the asset allocation included any saving conditions or caveats for the ex-wife, but I did like to see that her own disinterest may have led to bargaining for an underwater property instead of a paid-off house. Basically all custody battles where neither parent is a legitimately horrible person parent everyone is better off without. The kids always get screwed. I'm a paralegal. The best situations are when we get a sovereign citizen, someone in the USA who thinks that the US laws do not apply to them for a vast variety of reasons, hire us but won't let us do anything on their case. We've had to actually fire a bunch of clients because they have gone against our rules, like don't send a letter to the judge, don't write your own motions, don't announce that you're not Mark Smith because Mark Smith has capital letters and you were born with lowercase letters, etc. Honestly, a whole thread on these people wouldn't be enough. Lady brought a frivolous case to get out of a contract she signed. She lost, then sued the attorney and the witnesses for conspiring against her. They got her case dismissed and an award of attorney's fees which she refused to pay. Lawyer recorded it as a lien on her house and scheduled a foreclosure sale, which caused her mortgage lender to declare a default and accelerate entire mortgage balance. Lawyer made a side deal with lender to pay them all proceeds of the sale and then sold her house on courthouse steps to highest bidder and then arranged for sheriff to forcibly eject her onto the street with her. She's homeless now. Short story, honor your contracts and don't sue your lawyer when you don't. A witness for the plaintiff in a civil suit, who was a co-worker of the plaintiff, testified very strongly against the company and in favor of the plaintiff. I questioned her about bias toward the plaintiff, if they knew each other well, were friends, etc. She said, no, just friendly co-workers, work friends at best. I pinned her to it. When I got a chance to cross-examine the plaintiff, she had no choice but to burn her witness's credibility, because not only were they very close friends, but they had become sisters-in-law just a few years before. No, they did not have the same last name or anything, but I had done my homework. I still don't get why people want to fight small bias by destroying their credibility, but it happens more than you think. Someone I knew had a rodeo case where she had to defend a person who had been charged with a criminal offense, don't know what, confidential and whatnot. Even though the police and DA could pretty much pinpoint the crime to her client, there was no evidence to tie him to the crime, circumstantial at best. She had instructed him to shut up and let her do the talking during the trial, as from experience the client sometimes does not know how to answer a question properly. She pleads and can show that the court has nothing on her client. She feels that for once, a rodeo case is going her way. After her plea, the judge thanks her for her plea and turns to her client. He asks if the client had something to add to the plea. Client looks at her, back at the judge. Tears well up in his eyes and he blurts out, I'm so sorry, I'll never do it again. She threw her notes and everything else she had in her hands at the client, now convict. Apparently, she basically got screwed by her own client, who screwed himself even worse. Edit. Rodeo is the old term in our jurisdiction. Same connotation as pro bono. Not my case, but my dad's. He was the equivalent of a public defender decades ago. There was this guy that would get caught for being drunk in public lewdness, etc. every weekend. He seemed to draw the same judges and was pretty well known to everyone in the courthouse as an absolute lost cause. One of the regular judges had him appear in his court again. The judge is ready to give him a prison sentence because he was driving a car this time. But the guy starts crying that he finally got a job out of town and was trying to turn his life around. Judge tells him as long as he never makes a mistake in my town again he will just drop the charges. Well, sure as hell the guy shows up the following Monday. Same judge. Driving drunk again. My dad now has his case. The judge tells him he gave him his final chance. To which the guy sobs and replies, I was leaving town, Your Honor, but my friends decided to throw me a going away party. The judge was not amused. My dad had to do everything he could to not laugh. TLDR perpetual drunk that drove drunk gets a chance to leave town and not face charges. Gets drunk at a going away party in his honor. Drives, goes to jail. Faced the same judge both times. Well, not my story, but a prior boss's story. They had a drunk driver kills a car worth of people case at the time when they were a general practitioner. My boss was representing the family that got hit, one where the 2 kids and the wife had died, but the father had not, and wanted the college guy's drunk driving skin to be mounted on a wall. This was back before Facebook was commonly used in court proceedings and before tons of people realized that it is too great for any attorney worth their weight in salt to pass up. So, a kid, drunk driving college kid, had managed to get the judge's sympathy during the first part of the hearing by saying he was sorry, haunted, never going to drink again. This was going to ruin his life, etc. The judge seemed to really be eating it up. Then comes my boss and immediately burns this kid's remorse to the ground by showing numerous Facebook statuses and photos of them binge drinking, partying, and even joking about driving drunk from the date of the accident up until a night ago. The kid looked like he was being forced to swallow hot coals and the judge was absolutely livid. Needless to say, the kid had to do way more than just apologize and be remorseful after that. Wasn't there one where in a divorce case the husband asked to have custody of their pet cats and the wife had them put down out of spite? Represented a guy that stole 3 trucks from his work. Only 2 were recovered before trial. He showed up to a motion hearing in the 3rd one. In a case where a semi-truck driver ran over and killed a grandma and her daughter, leaving 2 kids without any family, the defense attorney said, "Really? The semi-truck driver is the victim here because he has to live with what he has done." Police officer, not a lawyer. I've had 2 different people I've arrested for DUI show up to court drunk, not on the same day. The judge was not amused. Both of them got sent straight to jail for a couple days for contempt, and their cases were rescheduled. One of them showed up to court drunk a second time when the case was rescheduled. The judge was even less amused for the sequel. Nalbut, a friend kept meticulous records of how much time his estranged wife spent with their daughter. He used pink highlighter for mom and blue highlighter for himself. Mom sailed into arbitration demanding full custody and handsome child support in the house. Dad pulled out 3 years' worth of year-long calendars. Mom had spent less than a full month with the child in 3 years. Mom was not happy with the outcome. Defendant trying to overturn default judgment claims person process server served wasn't him. Couldn't possibly be him. etc. At hearing, process server testifies he clearly recognizes defendant there in court 2 years later because defendant physically threatened him at time of service. Made himself pretty memorable. Oh, and process server was sure he served the right guy. BC at time of service. He had photo of defendant, which my client had helpfully sourced on mugshots.com. Well, the guy screwed himself technically. Also not a lawyer, but I was a witness on the case. My brother was beaten by a group of guys outside a bar because one of them lived in a place my mom rented out and tried to evict him for numerous reasons. And it doesn't stick cause in BC the rules always side with the tenant. One day after this beating they were lipping off to my mom and my brother called him out on it. So him and another guy came charging. Bro had a baseball bat nearby and smacked his buddy with it. Got charged with assault with a weapon. In court the guy who got hit came in drunk and called the judge a cocksucker or asshole or something. Judge told my brother, "I have to give you something cause you used a weapon so you get probation." Alright, it's time for my favorite Reddit acronym. EANL. I am not a lawyer, but I heard a story about a woman who had her soon-to-be ex-husband over during a custody battle and seduced him by getting him heavily intoxicated. She led him out to his car, sat him in the driver's seat and then called the police. He got a DWI and lost his parental rights. Some of my favorite stories of people being completely destroyed in court are ones involving a neighbor who decides to cut down trees that were not on their property line. They think, oh, it's just some dumb trees. Who cares, but that can get really expensive. Especially if they are older trees and you're pretty much guaranteed to lose in court. Not court, but Liv PD traffic stop I was watching and the guy told the officer, "I have caffeine pills in my back pocket," gets them out, puts them on the hood. Everyone's chill. Dude then comes clean and says it's Molly and the officers look at each other and go, "Do we even have a test kit for that?" Other officer says no, dude's face just shows he should have kept his mouth shut. Child protective investigator. I had a client who wanted to emancipate herself from her family. She was an entitled brat. Wanted to live with her drug dealing boyfriend. Judge began asking her for her pay stubs, plans, documents for said plans, assessed transportation. The brat had none of that figured out. Court ordered to give up her phone to prevent access to the drug dealers and court ordered to get a job, make plans to rent an apartment on her own. Everything she wanted. If not, she would be house in DJJ as her parent could no longer take care of her after she beat and attempted to hurt them multiple times. She didn't last 5 minutes under her court order after telling the judge he didn't understand and he was being mean. Upon her release from DJJ, she was still court ordered to do everything in order to emancipate herself. The judge was not to having it that day. Used to work in children's court representing parents. When I first started, I witnessed another attorney destroy any chance of their client getting their kids back. At a review hearing assessing whether the court should terminate parental rights, the attorney was so confused about what was happening that they requested unmonitored visits for their client, but didn't even address termination of rights. Needless to say, the court terminated the client's parental rights. The worst part was that earlier that day, the court took up a petition for more time, but denied it after the attorney failed to make any argument. Based on the facts, parent was doing really well. They probably would have won. The second worst part was overhearing the attorney tell her client to come back for the next review hearing, finalizing the adoption. Not only would there be nothing the parent could do at that hearing, but terminated parents aren't even allowed to be there. A spelling. I remember when I was a kid, my dad got a ticket for running a stop sign. He decided to fight it because the stop sign was buried in a bush and wasn't visible from the road. He and the police officer that had issued the ticket both arrived to court at the appointed time, but the judge wasn't there. After they waited for about 20 minutes, the bailiff finally apologized and told them they could go home and things would be rescheduled. Just after they had left, the judge finally arrived and found both my dad and the police officer in contempt for leaving and wasting her time. $180 traffic ticket became $2,500 contempt of court fines. About 5 years later, a friend of mine pulled the same judge for a DUI. Prescription, not booze. He didn't realize he shouldn't be driving on them. He just went without any counsel. He said that she said if he was stupid and ought to try to represent himself, he could sit there and not say anything, so he ended up just sitting there and not saying anything and lost his license for a first offense DUI. There were more than one news article and letters to the editor about what a disaster of a judge she was, so I'm sure a lot of other people had similar issues with her. My dad was a judge and had someone on trial for DUI. Guy would not stop running his mouth and was trash talking everyone in the room. He instructed him to stop. Dude did not stop. Dad placed him in contempt of court for 90 days. Dude gets out. Goes back to trial. First thing, he starts running his mouth again. Boom. Another 90 days in jail for contempt. 180 days in jail when a DUI in our state is only 60 days for his level of DUI. I took my ex to court because she had used my social security number to sign up for cable. I found out about it when she stopped paying for the service. She screwed herself over by just being herself. We show up to court. I turn in the contract from the cable company, showing my social security number and her own name signed on the contract. She didn't even try to forge my signature. She signed her own name in and tried to deny that she had any part of it. The judge tore her apart and it was nice. Not someone else, but my client screwed themselves. I'm doing landlord-tenant stuff and my client was facing eviction over non-payment. But the client was withholding rent payments because of habitability issues in the apartment. No heat, high lead levels, vermin. This is gonna be an easy win for me. Told my client continually to make sure they don't spend the money. Keep it but don't spend it. Because if you show the judge you still have the money, it looks real good for you in terms of making the judge believe that you're withholding for good reasons. We get up in front of the judge. Landlord doesn't have an attorney, so I'm dancing inside. There's no way I can lose. I make my arguments and the landlord makes his. Judge asks my client if they still have the money. Client goes, "Nah, I blew that it at the casino last week." My wife is a lawyer. Info: when children reach the age of majority, if they do not continue studying and start working, it is not necessary to pay alimony. Info: my wife's client found a new lover, which unleashed the wrath of the ex-wife, who started asking for more alimony for her children. Well, to win the case, it was necessary to prove that the children were working, but they could not get any proof of it. There was not much chance of winning, but they still went to court hoping that with the interrogations they could find information that would put them in evidence. On the day of the trial, the children did not go. Only the mother and her lawyer were present. Judge: "Madam, tell me why your children could not come." Mom: "They could not get permission at work." Judge: Lawyer: "Mom." Another few seconds of silence. Judge: "Well, that was fast." I know a girl who had a kid with someone, and when he decided he didn't want to be with her and just copper and went ballistic with fake abuse. rape, drug accusations, etc. She was even able to get his new GF to dump him. But she made the mistake of texting about how she was lying, and it was all revenge about 200 times. Saying things like, hey, you should get a protective order on him too. They can't prove if you're lying and just say you think your life is in danger. They always give it to women. His new GF got scared and finally realized how ducked this all was and gave the texts and everything to his lawyer. The day they read them out loud to her in court was supposedly pretty spectacular, but nothing happened to her and he still lost thousands in legal fees. Spent a couple nights in jail and months without his kid just to get to that point. There's enough real violence and abuse out there. People lying hurts real victims more than anyone else.